Right. Hi, everyone. This is Leanne Caruso. I'm the VP of 1851 at 1851 Franchise and No Limit Agency. And I'm so excited to have with us today Michelle Rowan of Franchise Business Review and Matt Kurowski of the Lash Lounge and a few other big projects. So we have been talking about, I know you've seen a lot of our webinars and a lot of our conversations with other franchisors and franchisees, but one of the things that we were talking about as colleagues is communication and how important that is right now. So I wanted to bring Matt and Michelle in to talk about things that they've seen on their day-to-day during this crisis. I'll let them introduce themselves a little bit and we can start an open conversation from there. Sound good?
Absolutely.
Great.
So Michelle, tell us about who you are. I think everybody knows who you are, but tell us again.
I don't know about that. I'm Michelle Rowan. I'm president and COO of Franchise Business Review. So we've been around for 15 years measuring feedback from franchisees to help franchisors understand what their perceptions are of what's going well, what needs more work, just trying to really help align franchisees and franchisors so that they're building really productive relationships and organizations. And I will tell you this whole, I mean, nobody expected this, but this whole experience of a pandemic and working business through it, it stunted me for a couple of weeks because we just really want to help our clients and help franchising in general. So all the content you guys have been putting out, I think IFA has been putting out great stuff that it's really, really great to see. And I'm glad to be part of it and hopefully give some people some new ideas to think about what could help them right now, because it's still undetermined how long this is going to happen or where we're going to be at. So thank you for having me today.
Sure, of course. We've definitely been we've been talking about this for a little over a week to get it on our calendars and to get the conversation open. And your perspective is very highly regarded, I think, in our franchising community. So we're excited to have you on.
Oh, thank you.
And Matt.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. These are two of my favorite people in franchising. So thrilled to be a part of this. So my background, marketing background, agency side, some client side with Under Armour for a number of years, and then made the move into franchising just over 5 years ago, joined Soccer Shots Franchising, came in a VP of development and marketing role. We had those roles combined at Soccer Shots, and then moved into a chief operating officer role over the last couple of years. I recently left that spot. And my wife and I have decided to join the other side of the table as franchisees. So we purchased the Lash Lounge franchise, impeccable timing with this current situation. But this was actually to be our opening week this week. So we're delayed, obviously, but keeping a positive approach and thinking about how we can come stronger when the time comes. So, kind of have enjoyed having varying perspectives over the course of my career, being on the supplier side, being on the franchisor side, and now sitting in a seat as a franchisee. Also doing some consulting with some local small businesses and a few other organizations as well.
That's great. And I'm so excited to hear your perspective from all the different sides, because you've experienced, not that you've experienced a crisis quite like this at Soccer Shots, but you've experienced on the franchisor, so you have that unique perspective. So would love to know from both of you, Matt, maybe you can start first about communication through all of this, and what is, I think that's been the most critical piece. I think people have had to, change directions in so many different ways, but staying in tune with their franchisees, with their suppliers, with their vendor partners, and having to shift how you communicate with people and how often you communicate with people and what you say and what you don't say and those kinds of things. So Matt, I'd love your perspective, off the gate for some opening thoughts.
Yeah, sure. We talk about communication a lot in franchising. We always have. It's a part of franchising. It's critical. I think a time like this really tests that and says, how can we put our money where our mouth is in terms of being great communicators with our teams, between franchisor, franchisee, with suppliers, you name it. And I think what we're seeing, which I think has been really interesting, and if there's maybe a silver lining here through all of this situation, is I actually think there's increased communication. I heard somebody say the other day, social distancing is probably a misnomer. Physical distancing, yeah, but the communication seems to be more intentional and yeah, maybe more frequent even. As a franchisee, I'm seeing that for sure from our franchisor. They're going above and beyond to make sure we feel comforted, to make sure we feel heard, and to make sure that they're proactively engaging with us as franchisees.
That's interesting you say that, because I've always worked from home and I've always been remote, and I'm usually the one or two people that are not in the office. So these last few weeks, now that everybody's working from home and we're doing video everything, I'm actually like so much more, or feel more inclusive, I guess, of the groups and the conversations, and you're not on the phone going, can I talk, what's the body language in there? What, jumping in on people. So it's actually been so nice to be part of, to see people and talk to people and interact with people. And I think that it's been an interesting shift in business as a whole.
Yeah, I agree for sure.
What I think is also interesting too is, and I just thought about this too, but the amount of empathy that people are showing and the ability to balance the work and the life. I think everyone has become more open to that and understanding of that. But I was just remembering that when this first happened, I think it's everyone's nature in franchising that they want to help. They want to provide information. And one of the suppliers, who's an excellent person in franchising and has a lot of thought leadership, put something out that, hey, this is actually good for franchising. Development will be great after this. And before I even saw the post, it was pulled down. So I said, hey, it's a dead link. And they responded and said, actually, I heard from franchisors that said I was being insensitive. It was bad timing. So we had a conversation about it, which is just brought up, thinking about what Matt said, that it's more intentional communication. And I think that because we react so quickly and we want to help people and give them information, that we forget to think that, oh my gosh, we're humans first and everybody is scared. And you have to address that, and you have to give people time to kind of wrap their head around it before you start talking about the silver lining, which is a very franchising, small business, entrepreneurship type of thing to do. Is, there's got to be a good side to this. What is it? Let's talk about it. So I think that you're right, is that it's intentional communication, which is the most important piece right now. Are you adding value to the conversation or to that business owner? Because they're certainly getting bombarded with communication right now from people they work with closely and people they don't know. Everyone's kind of jumped on the let's send something out, let's get in front of people and help them.
Right. So Matt, what kind of things are you saying from your perspective now as a franchisee, of things that you feel like are going well, and then among other colleagues, or things that you've heard of things that aren't going so well?
Yeah. Yeah, I think, Michelle, you talked there about the intentionality of what we're saying, and the messaging is really important right now. I personally, one of my core values is authenticity. So I really value that in communication. And I'd say I'll use our franchisor as an example at the Lash Lounge. They've been incredibly just genuine and authentic with the communication from day one. So it's not felt forced. It's not felt like we're painting a rosy picture where there isn't one. At the same time, it's been positive and upbeat, but it's a nice balance there of being transparent and authentic while also leading and not being, Debbie Downer either, and bringing down, everybody's aspirations. So I think that authentic, real communication, and it's funny, even this format that we're now, we've been using this type of format like we're using right this moment for some time, but it's just become so normal now, even over the last few weeks. And there's an authenticity to seeing each of us sitting in our makeshift home offices in some cases, or real home offices in other cases. And I just think right now, people, whether it's franchisee, franchisor, supplier, guests, customers, clients, authenticity is really, really important, I think, in messaging right now. Everybody's experiencing this in some similar ways, but also everybody's situation is a little different or a lot different. So I think just being open and sensitive to that's pretty important right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think availability. So you can't necessarily solve your franchisees' issues right now, but just being there to pick up that phone and letting them talk through whatever it is they need to. I think that it's important. As well, Leanne, you said, the social distancing thing, everyone is separated and we all need to feel connected. So use the video in your communications. Catherine Monson, I think, is doing a weekly video, if not more, out to not just her organization, Fast Signs franchisees, but also to IFA members. But I think that just them getting to see you can also convey a lot of that authenticity. So not just using the video platform in this type of conversation, but even just putting out your kind of updates or something like that so people can see you and feel connected is important.
Yeah.
How do you feel about, I feel like I know your answer, but vulnerability in your communication as a leader?
I think that, I don't know if you want to take this one, but I think that it's really hard to balance. And I would be interested in the male perspective of this. Because I feel like women have probably been monitoring their communications before now, because you have to have that balance of, I think there was an article that came out last year that was about exclamation points and how you kind of try and get your verbal cadence into writing. So I feel like I scrutinize all my communications even more. But I think that, there's definitely times, especially in the first couple of weeks, we had to make some changes to our business, and I was emotional about it, and not in front of people, but at home that happens. And my husband says, that's what makes you a good leader, is that you care so much about your people and your clients. So I think, and I'm getting upset now, but I think that I would be interested to hear about that, because I think that it can come through, but you still have to provide that leadership and have people feel comfortable that you're making these sound decisions and they're not emotionally based.
Right.
Yeah. I've always been a fan of vulnerability. I think it goes along with kind of that transparency and authenticity and in communication. And I think everyone is affected right now. So, the president of the Lash Lounge, Meg Roberts, I think just I have the utmost respect for her. She's great at what she does. She's affected by this too, and she's a person, and her family's affected. Just using her as an example, we're all impacted by it, and I think not showing a little bit of that vulnerability or hiding that vulnerability too much can maybe lead to a disconnect with those who are feeling the pain. And there's a fine line there. You said it, Michelle. I mean, it's a fine line, because if you show too much vulnerability, or if you come across as too vulnerable, you might not feel like you're leading and might not be instilling confidence in your team or your franchisee community or your guests or whoever it may be. But I think some vulnerability is important right now. This is unprecedented for every single one of us. Not one of us can say we've been through this before. So I think we're all impacted by it, and I think that's okay.
Yeah. And it's okay to say, I don't have the answer.
Yeah. Yeah. More now than ever, people get that. Yeah.
Turn to.
Yeah. Unless you do have the answers, then I'd love to have them.
And I just had that conversation recently. It's hard as a franchisor, I think, to say you don't have the answer, because you're used to having the answers and you're expected to have the answers. But I think if somebody would pretend, if my franchisor would pretend right now to have all the answers, I would probably be a little concerned, because they can't possibly have all the answers to an unprecedented situation.
Yeah. Well, I think the other side of that too is that franchisors typically, and it's changed, I think, over the last 10 years, but they're supposed to have this very structured way that you have to do things, and you can't deviate from that if you're a good franchisee. And I think that we're seeing a lot more flexibility within systems, because franchisors want to make sure that all these franchisees have a business to come back to in 30, 60, 90 days. So I think seeing that flexibility, and I wonder if that's going to change anything when we kind of get through this, and understanding that what works in one market, which franchisees have always said doesn't necessarily work in another. I think we're going to find that too within these segments of franchising, where people had to shut their doors completely and others could stay open in some limited capacity. We might see some new ideas come out of that, or some more options for business owners as they either ramp up or just kind of based on historically what's worked in their market.
Yeah.
Sorry, Matt. I think the creativity that comes out of this, and I keep making this joke, but we keep saying the word pivot like 32 times in the last 2 weeks, but to see how people have to pivot and the flexibility that they show in order to be a new business at the end of this, that 7 weeks ago when we're all at IFA in Orlando, none of us anticipated any of this, and the way the businesses will change and probably hopefully come out better on the other side, I think is going to be fascinating to watch and to be a part of, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's going to see, I mean, when we saw in 2009, we saw franchising was impacted by the recession. And what we saw out of that is that franchisors really did get better at the key parts of managing that franchise business and that relationship. So I think we are going to see that as difficult as this is, we're going to have stronger leaders and better communication pieces in place. Because I really hate to say this, but this is probably not the last pandemic or disruption that we see in our lifetime that's so devastating. So, you know, talking to some people today that are part of large brands that said we didn't even have a work from home policy for our corporate teams. Ironically, we were in the midst of writing it. But that was the thing. At IFA, we had so many speakers from government that were involved in things, and this wasn't even on our radar. This was just, and within 4 weeks, it's like devastation. So I do think that we'll see that kind of level up, which I think you're seeing across franchising, the amount of sharing that's going on of what's working here, and kind of trying to help others kind of just not even right their ship, but just keep that ship afloat.
Right. I think the evolution of more virtual discovery days,
yeah,
you know, being able to get people through the funnel faster, probably because they can use digital communications and video, and I think it's going to be interesting to see what do you think that, and Matt, you might have some perspective on this too. What do you think that brands should be doing right now that obviously they're being forced to do, for those that didn't have it, like a work from home plan or even a crisis communications plan that probably many brands didn't have before? Are there any other ideas you guys have seen that people are using to make it part of a future state business?
Yeah, I think it's been really interesting to watch the kind of alternate business model thing explode so quickly in many categories. I mean, carry out being the most obvious one, right? In the quick serve or even the restaurant world, to pivot that quickly. There's that word again, but to be able to, you know, go from now they've obviously had some heads up over the years with, you know, the delivery systems and stuff that have come into play, but some have not adopted that as quickly, and now we're forced to, seeing that in the physical fitness space and, you know, some other spaces. I think even my former employer, you know, at Soccer Shots, they did some online content, you know, where folks could do it at home with their families, which was awesome. I think maybe thinking of that proactively rather than reactively is an interesting one for brands to be considering right now. Hey, what's actually an opportunity either to supplement what we currently have or to be able to plug and play, you know, when necessary. I think I saw from you, Michelle, there's some brands that are talking about investing in technology, for example, now, or getting some technology projects done now. It's a lot easier to do those proactively than to have to react. I'm blown away by how some brands have reacted so well and so quickly and have changed the delivery system of their business model so quickly. But I think other brands might learn from that too. Hey, that's something we've got to be prepared to do so we can control it a little better and not just be reacting.
Yeah. Yeah, my husband and I actually also own a brewery in Maine. So we're dealing with that whole side too, where the highest profit margin was people coming in and sitting in the tasting room to have a beer. And that's gone. I mean, just completely gone. So we're lucky we work with distributors, but on the weekends, I'm now out delivering beer to people. They can order online, which I don't even think you could legally do in our state for this. And the governor just was like, wave my magic wand, and now it's happening. And we're like, can we just forget and just let this still continue on for the years?
I went to Glory Days yesterday and ordered a salad and 2 16-ounce sangrias
to go.
I'm like, this is a beautiful shift in nature. This is
yes.
I'm already seeing
brilliant.
I'm already seeing the petitions in Pennsylvania to keep that going once this passed.
Yes. Yeah.
They can't take it away from us now.
You can't take it away. It's not nice.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good transition to Michelle. You you guys at Franchise Business Review have put together a Smart Ideas project of. I'll let you explain it and kind of talk through what that is, but I think this is a good kind of segue into that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're trying to collect ideas from other people that are working in their businesses and just help share those. And so the idea is to ask franchisors to participate and say, what are you doing for your franchisees and then for what are your franchisees doing for customers or for their community, that we might be able to share out with others, and that might work in their business. So the idea is, again, just to help people kind of sustain any kind of revenue through this if they're open in any capacity. So I think that we saw a lot of people jump on the franchisees want to pay no royalties. And that makes sense. But if you're a smaller system and you're not royalty sufficient, that's going to put your franchisor out of business, which leaves you in a place that you have no support when you need it most. So it's important that your corporate staff is still in place. So I think that the idea of, one, we have to be less judgmental of what anyone else is doing, especially with their communication plans, because you can't say, this is how it's been done in the past. This is all new. So what I love about franchising is that it tends to not be as guarded, that if it works for me, I want to share it with you, because if you're doing things well, it's good for our industry. There's enough business out there that people can find the right fit for them. And I think that this is just going along those lines, that we are not trying to sell you into a business that you don't know what it's going to be like to run. We're setting realistic expectations. We're communicating with you what it's like to run this business, but we're going to also share those ideas with other people, because it's not going to impact your business to make sure that everyone is doing things the best way they can. So we did this back in, I think, I'm probably going to get the year wrong, 2010 or 12. We did a similar project. So we just wanted to, again, just try and help collect this information, share it out so that if it works for your business, great. So if you have ideas that you want to share, and you can participate anonymously, but I think this is beyond just the cutting royalties conversation. It really is about how are you helping your franchisees get the information they need, get the loans they need, and what else can you do? Little things that you can do. The Catherine Monson thing, I shared that in a post, I think last week or the week before, that just a video communication is awesome. I talked to A&W today, and they have some stores that were closed because they're in mall locations. There can't be takeout, and they have other locations that are doing really well. But what they did was they took their marketing fund and gave all the money back, and it just for cash flow for their franchisees. So thinking about things like that, where if you're a larger established franchisor and can do those types of things, that's great. That's not going to work for a 10-unit food chain. But if we can just keep collecting and sharing those ideas, you can probably find something that you could even tweak to work for your system, or just give you a new way to think about things and how you want to communicate with your system. That's
great. I can't wait to see what happens from that. And I did the ticker at the bottom for you.
Yeah.
It's impressive.
And I think it's 3 or 4 questions, open-ended, but we'll send it back out to everybody that participates, and hopefully collect some ideas there. But I think we'll leave it open for a while, just knowing that things are still changing so much each week.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate both of you for hopping on out of your very busy schedules. I know that we've all got a lot going on and trying to deal with so many new aspects of our life, working from home and, doing our mom and dad things, also trying to figure all of this out. So I appreciate both of your time. And if you have any final thoughts, I'd love to hear them.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, you start.
I will use the pivot word one more time, but I think
great word. I'm not blending it.
That's it. After today, I won't use it anymore. But I think for us as a franchisee, but even our franchisor, and other, even business in general out there, at some point there is that pivot point where you go from, okay, we've done what we can to cut expenses, we've done what we can to minimize the negative impact. It's terrible, it's bad, it's tragic in so many different ways, but we can't dwell on that piece of it forever. There's got to be a point where you make the turn and say, okay, now what do we do with this time to come screaming back and sprinting back when the opportunity is there, whenever that may be. It's hard to do with this unclear kind of end to this situation. We don't know the timing of that, but I think it's even just mentally and from just to keep yourself sane. At some point, you got to say, what do we do now going forward? Let's stop looking at the back. It doesn't mean to bury your head in the sand, but you can only do so much. There's only so many bills you can put on hold for a couple months. At some point, you got to say, what sets us up to come back, and how can we do something to maybe make up a little bit for some of that lost time, as a business, as an organization, when that time comes. that's what our mindset has been with my wife and I, with our business. It's what our franchisor, they've even branded it. They've really made that turn, and they did a fantastic job helping with the first phase. And now they've really made that turn to setting us up for success when the time comes.
Awesome. So what I think, my final thoughts are, I think that there's going to be a big story to tell once businesses get back up and running. And I think what we're going to see is that small business owners that were part of franchise systems rebounded quicker and came out stronger and did those things that Matt's saying, where they're finding those opportunities because of the amount of support that they get from their franchisor, from their community. And I hope that we can capture those stories and tell those stories, because again, I think that there's such a misconception about what franchising is and who are these franchisees. And I think that's the power of being in a franchise system, is when things are at their absolute worst, that you have a staff of people that it's beyond their paycheck. I mean, most of these corporate staffs are taking pay cuts to stay in support, to make sure that these business owners stay in business. So that's what I think we're going to see. I hope we find a way to capture it. I obviously love this industry. I've been in it for 15 years. So I just want to keep hearing these stories, and just pray that everybody gets through it and keeps their doors open and comes back to tell that story.
Absolutely. Oh, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.